Hi everyone. Are you preparing for an interview or just want to master Microsoft Copilot? In this video, I will take you through 50 of the most asked technical questions and answers from fundamental to advanced developer use cases like Copilot agents, plugins, and security. Stick around because by the end, you will be ready to impress in any Copilot interview or project discussion. Before we jump into the 50 Copilot interview questions, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Sigar Dave. I specialize in SharePoint, Power Platform, and Microsoft Copilot development. Over the past few years, I have delivered multiple enterprise projects helping businesses adopt AI-powered solutions. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I have shared the link and QR code here for easy access, which you can see right here. Now, let's get into the questions. The first thing we are going to work on, or we can talk on this particular video, is related to fundamentals. So, first question is what is Microsoft Copilot? So, a Microsoft Copilot is Microsoft's AI assistant that is embedded across Microsoft 365 applications such as Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, and Teams. At a high level, it combines generative large language models with the contextual signals and metadata, like context using the Microsoft Graph, which is available through Microsoft Graph. Things like emails, calendars, calendar events, shared documents, and team conversations are available using the Microsoft Graph. The result is an assistant that can draft content, summarize threads, surface actionable items, and augment user workflows for developers and architects. Copilot is more than just a consumer feature. It's a platform that can be extended, customized, and integrated with enterprise systems to create domain-specific assistants as Copilot agents. Question number two. What is the difference between Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Studio? So, it helps to think of two layers. First is Microsoft 365 Copilot is ready-made assistant, that is an out-of-the-box user assistant that helps end users to work with the Office apps, that summarizes, drafts, analyze using built-in capabilities which are available into the Microsoft 365. Whereas a Copilot Studio is little bit above that. It is the developer and admin toolset, that is for the IT or admin toolset that is used to design, configure, and deploy custom Copilot agents. Okay, in Studio, we have support for the connectors, Excels, and workflows, which can which where we can define actions or generative behavior. We can tune the prompts and grounding strategies, and also it will work with channels like Teams or Power App, right? Let's say if we want an assistant tailored to HR process, IT ticketing, or domain specific knowledge, you can build Copilot Studio for that. Question number three. What are Copilot agents? So a Copilot agent is a customized instance of Copilot that's built for a specific domain of business functions. Unlike the generic Copilot, which is available as in Microsoft 365, an agent can be configured, that is a custom agent, first thing. and it can be configured to access particular data sources, run the API calls, execute the Power Automate flows, and follow business rules. Right. So this is what we can do. We can use the connectors, prompts, workflows, and action inside the Copilot agents. For example, a service desk agent can quickly query ticketing system, propose fixes, and open incident automatically. Another example is a sales agent can pull CRM insights and draft a proposal. Agents are defined in Copilot Studio using, as I said, like connectors, prompts, and workflows and actions. The other thing is it is a well-designed agent which can take some automated actions using APIs or flows on behalf of users. So user can the agent can go and create a new ticket or open a ticket for the user instead of user, like in as an user. Question number 4. How does Copilot use Microsoft Graph for contents? Okay, so the Microsoft Graph a center of is a central context, we can say, to which is providing to Copilot. It helps to get the users' files, emails, calendar events, Teams chats, and other directory signals. When Copilot answer a question, answer a question or draft a content, the orchestration layer, which is available into the Microsoft Copilot, can ground the prompt with relevant graph contents. So the large language models using factual organizational context. The main important thing is graph enforces the permissions that that's the reason Copilot can only surface data, right? That only surface the data that a user is allowed to view. So user level access control is preserved. And for the developers, this means enabling the graph access and designing what piece of context should be pulled in for each agent action. So if someone is asking you like, how does Copilot use Microsoft Graph for context? So you can answer like that. The graph is supplying the user file, calendar, and chat context, whatever data user can see and read that. Graph is forcing the permissions onto that. This is grounding prompt with relevant tenant data. So whatever data user is accessing or has an access, that and that only data is available with the Copilot agent as well. And it respects the rule-based access control that by applying the graph permissions. Okay. Question number 5. What are connectors in Copilot Studio? So to answer this, we can say like connectors are the integration point or the bridge between Copilot and external system or a data that could be CRM systems like Dynamics or Salesforce, ticketing systems like ServiceNow or Jira, or any REST API calls like internal REST API calls to the database. In Copilot Studio, we can register connectors, define their authentication method, and model the endpoints the agent can call, right? So it is also supporting the standard authentication like OAuth and service principles. Also, it will enable the agent not just to read data from grounding, but also it can help to take actions like open tickets, update records, trigger any downstream processes. When we are designing any of the connectors, we need to make a strong authentication, secure handling, and limited permission scope. So no one should see what they are not supposed to see. Okay. So another advantage of connectors is it can enable the real-time query and actions to any of the different type of CRMs or ERPs or database, as I said. Okay. Question number 6. What are generative actions? Okay. So to answer this, we can see like generative actions are operations where Copilot use retrieved context, that is available using the Graph API and the LLM to produce output and optionally execute downstream logic if there is any logic implemented here. A classic example for this is draft a quarter one sales summary. So Copilot will retrieve relevant sales report, run the analysis onto it, and generate a structured summary of presentation, right? Another example, if I can give you, is create a support ticket with proposed steps. The agent will synthesize the problem, understand the problem, suggest its steps, and then call a ticketing API to create a ticket or a record. The generative actions blur the line between simple retrieval and action decision making. So they require careful, careful prompt design, validation rules, and security checks. So three things. What are generative actions in simple words? Those are the actions where the LLM generates content and or trigger a logic. The actions will combine the retrieval of data and generating the decision, like generating a ticket. It will use for dynamics and context driven tasks. So if someone is asking to generate a ticket, then it will go and run some of the steps. It will ultimately, by using the ticketing API, it will go and and generate a ticket into the system. Question number 7. What is grounding and why is it important? In simple words, if I say grounding equal to supply LLM with relevant factual context, or we can say grounding is the process for enriching a user's query with the right piece of factual context before sending it to LLM. Instead of asking the model a vague question, Copilot will first retrieve relevant documents, emails, or data rows via Graph API and search its indices, attach them as context to the LLM for the LLM, and then ask a model like LLM model to go over that evidence as an evidence. Grounding is very crucial because it reduces the hallucination and increase accuracy. So the LLM does not go hallucinate something in their own, right? We are giving some contextual or factual data to it as in terms of context of grounding, so that the grounding will help to that particular LLM to get what is the document I have to go through and how many retrieved items to pass and how the present citation in terms of where we get the result, right? So this will help us implement retrieval and semantic indexing. So the grounding in simple word is providing the factual data to LLM before LLM can hallucinate and provide answers from their side. It should have some sort of context so that it can look into it to get the answers for the user. Question number 8. What role does retrieval augmented generation RAG play? So retrieval augmentation generation or RAG is fundamental when you need factual knowledge-based responses. The pattern is convert document into embeddings, store them in vector index, run semantic search to retrieve the most relevant chunks for a user query, and then pass those chunks to the LLM as grounding context. This allows the model to generate answers rooted in your own documents and data. RAG is widely used in Copilot agents that answer policy questions, search internal knowledge bases, or product domain accurate output. As a developer, we will tune embedding, similarity thresholds, chunk sizes, and citation strategies. So a RAG plays a very good role in terms of the Copilot or Copilot Studio or Copilot agents. So whatever data we are providing it, it is considered as an embedded document, and then it is converted into the vector DB. And whenever we are getting large language model generation, it will go and search that particular vector DB to get the data out as an output. It will use the vector search for the relevance of data, and knowledge heavy agents. It is very useful to have that as a retrieved augmented generation uh, data. Okay. Question number 9. How does Copilot respect permissions and security? So a Copilot, as we already talked in previous slide, that Copilot is working with Graph APIs, and Graph APIs are working with the permission. So whatever permission is user is having, according to that permission, the Copilot will get the answer. If a user is not having a permission to view any of the document, the answer is not going to be available from that document. So in simple word, it uses Microsoft 365 role-based access and the graph permissions to retrieve the data. The agent, like Copilot agent, can only access data a user can see. So if I don't have any permissions to any document, I don't going to retrieve an answer from that document. The audit logs and compliance controls available. So what does that means is the activity is logged for auditing and data residency, or we can say compliance settings apply with the Microsoft Cloud services. So it is like whatever activities are being happening to the Copilot agents, those are also all logged. So in future, if you want to go through that, we can also do that. Question number 10. Typical use cases for developer built Copilot agents. So to answer this, these are the different options we can have, like IT help desk agent, HR onboarding agent, sales enabling agent, knowledge assistance, where a knowledge is being provided to the Copilot and then he is behaving like assistant. Automated ticketing system we can incorporate, report generation we can incorporate, policy lookup is something which we can incorporate as an agent, where we provide our policy as in knowledge source to our agent, and agent is getting the answer out of that policy document. This typical use case is complex multi-step scenarios as well. So a multi-step scenario is where we have to implement multiple steps in terms of workflow implementation, enterprise workflow, that can also be done using the Copilot agent. Before we move into the video, I want to showcase my YouTube channel, that is a SharePoint guy. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so to get the updates about any new video which I am uploading into. Let's move into the next question. The next section we are going to talk about is related to the prompting, orchestration, and design into the Copilot. So let's move to the question number 11. What is prompt engineering for Copilot agents? So prompt engineering is the craft system, designing the text you feed to the model so it behaves reliably. In Copilot agents, you will use system prompts to set role and constraints, user prompts to capture intent, and example or templates to show desired output structure. The good prompt specify the tone, length, and formatting and instructions for the model to cite sources or verify the fact when possible. It also includes instructions about how aggressive the agent may be, should take actions, and embed validation checks and security and safety, so that the agent should ask about the confirmation before any of the destructive operations like deleting the data. Okay. The question number 12 is, what is the prompt chaining and when to use it? So prompt chaining decomposes a large complex task or complex request into smaller subtasks that agent executes one by one. For example, to prepare a customer risk report, you might retrieve the latest sales and support. That is our first prompt. Second will be generate a SWOT analysis or trend. Third one is draft slide bullets. And fourth one is assemble the final presentation. Breaking the problem into steps let you validate immediate results, right? It will help you to immediate checks and apply business rules between steps and reduce the cognitive load on the LLM. The prompt chaining is particularly valuable for workflows that require decision points and external API calls. So if we do the multiple prompts, like sequence of prompts, instead of having one big prompt, we can make it as a sequential prompts like prompt chaining. And it will also improve the reliability and multi-step tasks. And we can also validate the data in between before go with full-fledged with the LLM. Question number 13. How to design orchestration logic? Okay, so what is orchestration? So the orchestration is the decision logic that routes user queries to the right components. Should this request be satisfied by graph fetch, a search, an LLM call, or a plugin that perform an external actions? That particular decision is being done by the orchestration. We need to design our orchestration layer to include the fallback flows as well, right? And those for the high risk operations, orchestration is something which we have to provide for build verification, approval gates of for actions. So that is something which we require. The clear orchestration will reduce the unexpected behavior of the system and make the system auditable as well. Question number 14. What are plugins versus connect? Okay. In simple words, connectors equal to data slash API integration points. Like API integration points are considered as connectors, while plugins are LLM extensors or callback tools with logic. So plugins are something like tools we can consider that can call some action. Plugins can call connectors and perform richer actions. So plugins can also call the connectors and perform richer actions onto that. In general words, these both terms, plugins and connectors, overlap each other, but both are having separate responsibilities. Connectors are primarily the plumbing, authenticated connections that let the agent pull or push data to external services that a connector can do, while plugins are higher level. They extend the LLM's capability by implementing domain logic, data transformation, or multi-step action that LLM can call. So plugins are, as I said, like callable tools with logic. Question number 15. How to build a semantic index for retrieval? So what is first we have to understand what is semantic index. So semantic index is the process of transforming documents and structured data into different vectors. So whatever data we have as a document, it will convert into chunks. After, by those chunks, we create the embeddings and store into the vector index like vector database. The pipeline include ingesting documents and cleaning, and this pipeline which I just told right now. The next step that we have to do is a well-tuned indexed yield. So whatever chunk size we are having, and we have to embed that into the model, and then we have to implement the metadata and timestamp for filtering of those chunks. So it is a well-tuned indexed yields, highly relevant retrieval results, and improvement of grounding quality. The grounding which we already discussed into the previous slides. Question number 16. What are the best practices for chunking documents? So chunking is both art and science, I will say. So chunks are large enough to preserve meaning, but small enough to be specific and efficient. So it will be chunked on base of the boundaries like paragraph or particular section. We should Avoid splitting sentences or tables awkwardly. The splitting of chunks, like where is there is a document or a paragraph, we have to split into the chunks with meaning. We cannot do it in awkward way. The chunks can be overlapped whenever needed. So one context can also overlap with another chunk. So no issues into it. But the chunks in simple word are structured content like tables and code that will be converted to canonical text forms or keep table metadata so the model can reason over. The good chunking materially improves retrieval relevance. Question number 17. How many retrieved chunks should you pass to the LLM? Typical range is 3 to 10 chunks, depends on chunk size and model, what model you are using. There is no properly right number is provided. It depends on the chunk size, the LLM context window, and how precise the search is. Generally 3 to 10 chunks. The trade-off is more the context versus token limit and noise. Okay. So the more chunk we bring more evidence, but also increase the token usage and may introduce conflicting information. We should use the score threading or the scoring threshold and deduplication in between the chunks so that we don't have that issue with the chunks. And we should have to consider progressive disclosure. We should start with top three and only fetch more info if the LLM is asking for it. Question number 18. How do you design confirmation approval flows? When an agent performs an action that changes state, like creating tickets, changing records, or sending official communication, we should require explicit user confirmation, implement role checks to ensure only the authorized users can proceed. That is another point which we have to make sure. And third step is considering an undo or reversal flow wherever possible, so that in case if we want to undo that, a user should be able to do that as well. This will help help a user to build trust and limit accidental disruptive changes. Question number 19. How to handle ambiguous user queries? When Copilot encounters ambiguity, don't guess silently. The good user experience guide the user to ask a clarifying questions, should propose an option, or give the best guess with caveats. It will provide multiple suggestions ranked by confidence, right? And it will also go and keep the interaction short and iterative. So what I mean by that is getting the answers clearly labeled as it is a tentative and invite a confirmation from the user side. The iterative iterations are more reliable than monolithic answers. That will reduce the mistakes and let user steer the agent forward or towards the right outcome if there is any ambiguous user query is available to the Copilot agent. Question number 20. How to measure prompt effectiveness? The first thing is prompt effectiveness is measurable. We can run A/B test different prompt templates for the different prompt templates. We can also get the answer accuracy and then we can track the accuracy, user satisfaction level, and what are the follow-up queries a user is asking. The other thing is we can monitor the hallucination incident and correction rates, right? So there is a case where LLM is not having that much of context and it start hallucinating about the result or about the context. And at that time, we can measure how frequently user accepts or reject the model suggestions over the time. We can coverage prompt template that really or reliably produce correct and actionable outputs for the domain for the agent. Now we are moving to the another section of our questions and answer, which is related to the integration, APIs, and app patterns. Question number 21. How do Copilot agents call external APIs securely? So, to do that, Copilot agent will use OAuth 2.0, service principal, or manage identity. For external services, it will use the OAuth 2 flows with delegated or application permissions as appropriate, whatever is required. For Azure resources, it will prefer the managed identities, so a secret aren't embedded into the code. All right. The other thing is it will store the credentials in the secure stores like key vaults. It is not going to be encoded into the code itself. And the thing is, it will go for the least privilege permission. So it is always not going to apply the higher permissions, but it will go and apply for the least privileges. And it is going to grant the permissions which are very least in terms of privilege to the agent. It will also implement the token refresh and retry logic for the transient failures. If there is any failure occur, it will also apply the retry logic with the robust logging without any secrets to logs. Okay, let's move to the next one. Question number 22. What APIs and endpoints are commonly used with Copilot? A very common answer is Microsoft Graph, users, APIs, emails, files, calendars, etc. Those are being utilized using the Microsoft Graph. Some of the REST API endpoints for CRM, ERP, ticket system, or internal service calls. The REST API endpoints are being used. And also, for some type of LLM related task, we can also use Azure OpenAI or custom large language model endpoints are also utilized. Question number 23. How does Graph Connector ingestion work? The Graph Connectors enable external content to appear in Microsoft Graph search and therefore became available for Copilot grounding. The ingestion process maps external content like external metadata, apply a security trimming to it so that if a user is not allowed to see that data, it is not he or she is not going to see it, and it is also going to add the refresh cadence. Like Microsoft Graph indexing is also going to be added into it, right? And it will also going to map the metadata. Security teaming refresh policies are also going to be applied, and it will also make the external corporate available to Copilot grounding. Like external data is also going to be available for that graph connector ingest the data. Question number 24. How to integrate Copilot with Power Platform? We can use the Power Automate to trigger the Copilot actions from the Power Automate flows. We can call the data hours table for getting the structured data, which can be used into the Copilot. We can also build the Power Apps front end with embedded agents. So whatever data we are having into the Power Apps, that can also work with the Copilot Studios. The Power App can also embed Copilot within custom UI, and this combination of Power Apps plus Copilot or the Power Automate and everything will help developers to build full end-to-end experience like natural language uh, inputs from the user, which is backed by flows and structured storage. Question number 25. When should you use Azure Cognitive Search versus VectorDB? This is very important question which is being asked by the interviewers sometimes. So Azure Cognitive Search is very powerful. It is providing a fully managed search platform with full text search, semantic capabilities, and Microsoft native. It is available. while vector DBs are purely semantic similarity at scale, for example, embeddings. So in simple word, if we can say, Azure Cognitive Search provide a powerful, fully managed search platform with fully text indexing, facets, filters, and optional semantic ranking. Various vector database or vector DBs excel at semantic similarity queries using embeddings. A common pattern is to use filters and metadata in cognitive search to narrow the candidate set, then run the semantic retrieval via vector search to rank the top items. Evaluate based on scale, latency, and the complexity of your retrieval. So generally we use both like filtering plus vector retrieval. So as I said, like filtering the metadata in using the cognitive search, and then based on the scale of the output rank using the vector, we can get the rank of top items to be written by the LLM. Question number 26. How to handle tables, spreadsheets, and structured data. So the structured data like spreadsheet and tables need a very special handling in terms of Copilot. We need to convert the table to normalized text or structured JSON for embedding with the Copilot. We can use schema metadata and column labels during the grounding process. We can use the Excel and CSV connectors to fetch raw numeric data for the analysis purpose, right? So as I say, like for the very heavy analytical task needs to be performed onto the Excel sheet or the spreadsheet, we can fetch that raw numbers and run a deterministic computation on it, and then we can use the proper annotated structured data to be used into the LLMs to get more analytical or proper or correct data to be written from the tables and spreadsheet. Question number 27. How to support multi-tenant apps with Copilot agents? If you build a multi-tenant product that exposes Copilot agents to customer organization, you must strictly isolate the tenant data. We must strictly isolate each tenant's data and ensure tenant scope connectors are there, like tenant scope provisioning is being happening. We also have to use the separate connectors configuration per tenant. So we cannot use a connector which is a multi-tenant. We have to force the tenant level per tenant level role-based access and the provisioning as well. We also have to meter the usage and separate telemetry per tenant so that we can have it in that way. So if we are considering the separate telemetry and logs per tenant for compliance and billing, multi-tenant deployment requires careful design around identity, tenancy, and data boundaries. So this is very important. Okay. Question number 28. How to design the UX for agent responses. Sometimes, if we are talking about the output of our agent, presentation matters. We should prefer a concise answer, a short answer, followed by a supporting context and list of sources that model use, that is a citations. This will help a next step action such as if you want whatever action we want to take, like open ticket, send an email, or show full report or something like that. Or if you require any type of confirmation from the client, we have to display that in a proper way. That, as I said, like we should have to have the actions as a second step, where or if you want to take any of the next steps with the confirmation. We have to show the confidence in our user experience design, UX design, and why explanations. That is why we are thinking to display this data in this way. The short and sweet answer is always provide concise, a small short answers with to the point answers with the context and the citations. And if there are any steps needs to be done, like open ticket, show full report or anything, that button should be the second step. And if there are any confirmation needs to be taken, that also needs to be done in the proper UX manner. Question number 29. How to manage versioning and change control. Okay, this is very important. How you will manage the versioning inside the agent, right? So as soon as our agent evolves, the versioning of prompts, connector schemas, and plugin logic is very important. So in that case, we have to consider the prompt versioning, connector versioning, and some action schemas also are important. We can implement the CI/CD for Studio artifacts where supported. If it is supported, we can also run on that. We can publish release notes for changes that is going to impact the behavior and maintain the rollback plan in case if it is not working as expected. We should also consider the rollback plan for that. Versioning of our Copilot is very critical to reproduce previous behavior during audits and investigation. If in case we have some audits, we should have that versioning in place. Question number 30. How to log and trace agent activity. Okay. So the to get the agent activity, we have to first log user queries, whatever data source we have retrieved, what model has responded, and what actions are being taken. All these things are there which we have to log as an activity. We also have to capture the correlation IDs for end-to-end tracing. So this is something which we have to check in SharePoint Online as well. If you have seen this, we always, whenever there is an error, we see the correlation ID into it. It is same way we can have the correlation IDs for end-to-end tracing, what has happened till that time. The main important thing is whenever we are logging any of the things, let's say user queries, retrieved sources, model response, or action taken, we also have to make sure we don't log the secrets or something which is not necessary, which is uh, uh, sensitive content or some privacy related data. We should not log it inside our activity trace. Okay. Now we are moving into the next section. The next section is advanced development safety and OPS related questions with answers. So let's start with question number 31. How to reduce hallucinations in production agents? This is very important question for the thing to understand. So hallucination occurs when the model invent facts. The primary mitigation is grounding. Always retrieve factual evidence and supply it to the model. Okay. Additionally, run deterministic and sanity checks always and require human review for actions that have safety or compliance into it. So the validation of output against deterministic checks is also required. Surface uncertainty and require human review for risky answers. So if there are any issues you think will be available to you which are risky, so always we have to get them tracked. So we have to track hallucination rates and refine the retrieval and prompt patterns that most reduce those incidents. So that is also something we have to check. So to simply answer these, whenever you are working with the agent, make sure you are grounding it properly. So you are providing the factual evidence to your agent. The second thing is whenever required, a human review needs to be done. So whatever actions are being taken by the agent, you, if needed, if it is a risky thing, you want your humans to review those parts. And some sanity checks are also required. So let's say validating of dates, numeric ranges, IDs, or something like that. Then we have to get that checks as well. Okay, question number 32. Can you fine tune models for Copilot agents? Fine tuning can provide domain specific but comes with cost and governance trade-offs. Depending on your platform, some platforms allow fine tuning or instruction tuning. It also depends on the vendor who is that person, so that we can able to fine tune or base model or use instruction tuning approach. If the fine tuning is not available, then the alternative is use the system prompts, example driven prompts, or some type of adapters. So for example, lightweight we can adapters we can use that sit between the retrieval and modern invocations. Copilot also supports BYOM scenario, okay, where you can integrate privately hosted models under your governance. Question number 33. What monitoring metrics should you collect? Okay, so the key metrics that fall under the monitoring metrics is usage metrics, how many query has been done for per user, per agent, per connector. That is like session counts, per agent load, all the things. The quality metrics measures the user satisfaction level, user ratings, how many correction rate is there, how many corrections that a user is asking for the agent to perform, hallucination rate, that is also something which can be considered in the quality metrics. The third metrics we can have is the reliability metrics, which includes latency, API error rates, and retry behaviors. Combine telemetry with sample logs for quality reviews. Monitoring these metrics lets you prioritize improvements and detect regression early. Question number 34. How to A/B test an agent prompts and behavior. To optimize the agent behavior, you run controlled A/B experiment where user traffic is split across prompt variants or orchestration strategies. So we can randomize prompt templates or orchestration variations for cohorts. We can downstream or we can measure downstream KPIs like how many time, what time has been saved, how many actions completed, user rating about the response provided by the agents, and according to that, we can use statistical test and run for sufficient sample size. So we can ensure experiments are statically powered and run long enough to avoid false positives. We can capture qualitative feedbacks as part of the experiment to understand why one variant wins. Question number 35. How to implement throttling and rate limits. So rate limit LLM calls and connector calls to avoid overload and cost spikes. So what I mean by that is LLM calls and external API usage can be expensive and can overload backends if unthrottled. Okay. So we have to implement policies to cap per user or per tenant throughout and token usage. That is what we are talking in here. That is a token budget per session to control cost. And third thing is we have to degrade gracefully, return some cached answers or route low priority tasks to batch processing or something like that. And that will help degradation, like graceful degradation when limit reach. So whenever there is a limit reach, what we see in the chat GPT, right? If you're using the free version, after some time it will say, okay, your limit has been completed. It will get you answers, but with some limited degradation, graceful degradation into that case. Question number 36. How to do secure testing and staging. The testing the agents will read with real production data is very, very risky. So we have to use sanitized or synthetic data sets for the development and the QA. Whenever necessary, use subset data with strict access controls. So these are the different options. So we have to use the mask synthetic data in Dev study. We cannot directly use the production data. We have to isolate the test tenants and the connectors. So everything needs to be isolated from the production tenant so that we don't go and lose any of the data. It should be done into the separate environments. We also have to run or provide the role-based access control policies in both the environments, like staging and production. We also have to run the security scans, dependency checks, and privacy implement assessment before rollout. So this practice, like running the security checks, compliance scans, and all that stuff, will reduce the risk of data leaks and ensure consistent behavior across environments. So this is very, very important. Question number 37. How to ensure regularity compliances like GDPR, HIPAA. So the compliance requires you to control where data is processed and how long it's stored. That is the main thing we consider in the compliance. So what we have to just make sure is whatever deployment we are doing, it respects regional data residency requirement and that any external model calls don't violate tenant policies. So it should not be multi-tenant type of thing. Okay, so the processing of data needs to be allowed jurisdiction and tenant bounds. The tenant, it should be done into the tenant itself, not cross tenants. We have to detect the PII, implement the PII detection and also the masking of sensitive records before sending to external models. That we also have to do the masking of the data. And third thing is maintaining the data retention and deletion control. So that is very, very important when we are considering about retention policy and automated deletion paths. Record consistency where necessary. Wherever we require to record something, we have to do that. Collaborate with legal and compliance teams to map the agent's data flow to regulatory obligations. So we also have to maintain that part. Question number 38, how to do incident response for agent mistakes? So when agent produce an erroneous or harmful output, the user should easily report issue with context and a correlation ID. So this is very, very important with the context and the correlation ID. This will enable quick retrieval of full request response trace for root cause analysis. That will help, as I said. It will maintain a playbook for different incident types, including rollback of patch faulty prompt connector quickly. So we can disable that connector or applying immediate policy filters or something like that. This will also communicate transparently to affected users and log remediation steps for audit and learning. So if we have that option for if report issue when there is a faulty output by the agent, we can report the issue with the correlation ID so that a root cause analysis can be done. In that way, we can have the full trace about the issue so that it will help to root cause analysis. And also we can have an option for the rollback or patch faulty prompts connectors quickly. Question number 39. How to enforce safe content and brand tone? We should use system prompts with style and compliance constraints. What I mean by that, when we say system prompts, it will be set to brand wise and include explicit instructions about brand content and compliance requirement. Once the model output, it will apply automated filters for profanity, hate speech, or other policy violations, right? And it will also respond or route flag responses for human review. So whatever data which is not properly output, which can be a hate space or other type of policy violations for that particular agent can be given for the human review for the sensitive categories. Those are coming under the sensitive category. Question number 40. What are responsible AI practices for Copilot? So the responsive AI is set of engineering, governance and cultural practices. Be transparent with the user. So transparency is what how the data has been sourced, what is the source for the model used and its confidence, like how much confidence we are having into it. Regularly test models for bias and performance fairness evaluation or representative data sets, right? Protect privacy by uh, um, minimizing data passed to third-party models and by retaining only necessary logs. So bias testing needs to be done and privacy protection also needs to be checked. And for consequential decisions, we have to be human in the loop for high risk decisions where a high risk decision risk is very high. We have to involve human into it. This will establish governance committees and policies to oversee agent behavior and changes where a high risk decision is involved. Question number. Now we are moving into the next section, which is related to the deployment, ops, career, and future about the Copilot and Copilot agents. Let's start with the question number 41. What's the developer workflow to build a Copilot agent? First thing, define a use case, the data sources that are going to be used into the Copilot agent, and what actions we want to perform by using the Copilot agent. If we want to implement any of the connectors or prompts or both the things, we have to do that as a next step. And then we have to stage our Copilot agent into the Copilot Studio. Once we are happy, whatever task we have performed is properly working and whatever we have done so far is validated properly, then we have to deploy this Copilot Studio to limited group of people. We have to get some data like telemetry data or the qualitative feedback, what they feel about the Copilot agent. And then we have to provide that to broader audience. But these are the three steps: deploy to fewer users, monitor their answers or positive feedback or what type of feedback they are having. And if it is going good, then we can roll out to broad audience. So this is the step. So these are the steps we can use to develop a Copilot agent. Question number 42. How should you roll out Copilot agents to users? First thing is Copilot rollout. Copilot agent rollout should be staged. Begin with pilot groups, like small number of groups and trusted users, or specific team you can consider. And then you can gather some feedback about your Copilot agent, how it is working and if there are any refinements needed or not. You can also use provided training materials to your users, like example prompts or a known list of capabilities, what a Copilot agent can perform, and also the limitations, what it is not able to do. Right, a training of users, you can provide a clear guidelines, what it can do and what it can't do in terms of prompts or something with the examples as well. And the third thing is we have to monitor the adoption or the usage and the satisfaction score of the agent, how soon it is how soon we can respond to any of the bugs or any of the feedbacks that has been provided by the users. We have to work on that and fix it, and then we have to quickly fix it. And the next step is to gradually we have to roll out to reduce risk with lot of users. So that is done into the small steps or the step-by-step process. Question number 43. How to price and control cost for LLM usage? This is very, very important questions to be answered, because in terms of Copilot or LLM, everything is considered as tokens, right? LLM inference costs can add up. We have to track the tokens usage and model calls per agent and user. We have to set some budget or quota at a tenant or department level, right? We have to use cheaper models or low risk tasks and reserve large models for high value tasks. So this is important. We have to identify which can be done with the low level of the cheaper models, which tasks can be done as in cheaper models with the low risk tasks, and which are the high risk tasks that needs requires the large language models. We have to also implement the quota and caching. So the caching can be is used for the common answers, which can be reused in terms of retrieval of context where possible, which will help to implement coast alerts and throttling to avoid surprises. So the caching will be used where we already have the answer, the LLM or the agent already have the answer somewhere, which is being retrieved instead of going in searching the data again. So that way we can control the cost and the LLM usage. How to train teams on prompt based practices? The main thing is we can use the provide prompt template. We can provide templates to our team. We can guide them on what to do and don'ts when we are giving any of the prompts. We can provide sample interactions, like what prompt we can use as an example to get the best output from our agent. We can also hold workshops and hands-on labs where we can train them in terms of sessions, or we can also give some practical hands-on labs to them so that they can play with our agent to get the most out of it. The third thing which we can do is encourage a user to share a repository of how high quality prompts and pair junior staff with experienced prompt engineers. So it is very, very important. So junior users or junior engineers can be paired with the highly educated or highly understanding prompt engineers. So in that way, institutionalizing prompt practice improve agent quality and reduce misuses. So encourage sharing effective prompt internally is something where we can have a shared repository of how high quality prompts. Question number 45. What debug tools and techniques are useful? Okay. So when debugging, we need to we need reproducibility. So if the bug is not reproduced, we cannot do anything. Okay. So we have to capture and replay the exact sequence. So replay tool with original prompt, like whatever user has added as an request to the agent, we have to get that. We have to also retrieve the context on which context it is working on, and what is the output of our model that we have to check. We also have to build sometimes a unit test for the connectors that will mock external endpoints and synthetic test suits for common prompts. So that is something which we can do. Like for the connectors, we can make mock them by using the unit tests or some types of fake API calls. We can correlate logs across connectors and model endpoints. So we can go by using these three things like replay of original prompt, what context it worked on, what output our model has given. According to that, we can correlate with the logs to get what exactly went wrong into that case. And then in that way, we can debug the Copilot agent. Question number 46. How to design agent fallbacks and graceful degradation. So in case of service fail, we have to plan for it. If a connector or model endpoint is not available or unavailable at that time, we have to return a cached answer or limited feature mode if service is not available at that time. Okay. We also have to provide instructive error messages. We have to provide helpful error message or instructive error messages that will explain what next step we have to a user has to take. We always also include human escalation. So in terms of the agent is not able to provide an answer to the requirement, we have to include human in terms of getting the answers. The graceful degradation preserves users' trust when parts of the pipeline are degraded. So if something is not being done by the agent, they can include a human to gracefully say, I'm not able to do it. Now I have to include human into it in terms of review. Okay, we are moving ahead with the last three questions now. So let's go into that. Question number 47. How to measure ROI and business impact? So the ROI is business driven. How much quantify time saved, how many tickets has been resolution, the ticket resolution time, and user satisfaction level, how user is satisfied. Based on these three things, we can measure the ROI, the track adoption growth and automation rate. So how many automation thing has been done using these Copilot agent that we can measure, and the adoption of growth that also we can measure by using and according to that, we can consider the business impact. The third thing is we can consider the quantitative telemetry, combination of quantitative telemetry and qualitative user feedback. We can create a dashboard that maps agent usage to cost saving and the revenue impact to stakeholders, can where we can they can see how the business has been impacted by using the Copilot. It is worth having the Copilot agent, or it is working as expected, or it is helping to automate some of the tasks. How much percentage of automation has been done into that case using the Copilot agent? All can be considered into this. What skills should developers build for Copilot work? A practical Copilot developer must have the skills as prompt engineering, understanding about the Microsoft Graph APIs, understanding about the Power Platform in Azure OpenAI basics. When I'm saying Azure OpenAI basics, I mean how the model hosting platform works, and so the API designs in terms of secure API designs, logging and monitoring of the output, inputs and outputs, and also it should have the combination of API integration, security handling, observability, and responsible AI practices. So it is a combination delivers robust and compliance copilots. If a person is having the prompt engineering knowledge, Microsoft API knowledge, understanding about Power Platform, when I say Power Platform, that considered of how the things are working in the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, and basics about Open AI, like how the Azure OpenAI or other model hosting platform work, and how the secure API design should work, and all that stuff. We are down to last two questions. Question number 49. What are common pitfalls when building Copilot agents? This is very important to understand what are the main common pitfalls we are having when we are building Copilot agents. First and foremost, over trusting model outputs without grounding or checks. Right. So if you are over trusting your model, like whatever answer it is giving is 100% working and a truthful answer, you may go in a pitfall. Second thing is very poorly scoped connectors or over broad permissions. So if you are giving very much permissions to your Copilot in terms of the graph API permission and all that stuff, that will also lead you into a pitfall where you come across thing that uh, um, connectors are overly broad permissions and neglecting very least principles, very least privilege principle. We should go with very least scope first instead of providing all the things. Third thing is there is no monitoring, making regression invisible. So what I mean by that is if we lack monitoring, that means slow detection of issue or cost overrun. This will avoid, we can avoid all of these three main reasons for the pitfall by implementing the grounding. We can have the validation logic, properly list permission scope permissions, and robust of logging and stage rollout. Those are the main things that we have to consider to not fall into the pitfalls and working with the Copilot agent. Question number 50. What's the future direction for Copilot and agents? Looking ahead, expect Copilot agents to become more deeply specialized in industry verticals like legal, healthcare, finance, with tailored grounding and certified knowledge. So what I can say is deeper knowledge, domain specialization, and multi-modal capabilities like legal domain, healthcare domain, finance domain. It will have the tighter integration with more autonomy with safeguards. What I mean by that is uh, it will have the multimodal inputs with broadened use cases, like agent will increasingly orchestrate complex workflows autonomously, but under tighter governance and human oversight for safety. Developer tooling will improve, offering better observability, versioning of your agent, and prompt the life cycle management so organizations can scale Copilot with confidence. So it will be helpful for improved tools for observability, having the human eye onto it, and the governance will be fine grained so that we have all the details what we want for the Copilot as a future direction. So it is going to evolve and evolve more and more. It will going to be much more interesting and much more good technology to learn in terms of the upcoming AI era. Okay, so yes, that's a wrap up for our 50 technical questions and answers on Microsoft Copilot. I hope this help you understand not just the basics, but also the developer focus aspects like Copilot Studio, agents, connectors, and enterprise integration. If you found this valuable, don't forget to like the video, share it with your network, and subscribe for more deep dive into Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Power Platform, and AI development. Also, let me know in the comment which topic you would like me to cover next. Maybe a hands-on demo building a Copilot agent or real-world integration scenarios with APIs. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.